Hello. It is time to talk about the books I read in September. And for this, for this past month, I've really actually happened to read a lot of books that I actually own, which is not as typical, so good for me. But I read 5 books, and why don't we start by talking about... You know what, I'll start by talking about the one that I don't own, which is a audiobook called Leave Only Footprints by Connor Knighton. So this was nonfiction, and it's about the American national parks. And Knighton himself, he, can I speak English? At the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, beginning, he came up with this idea to go around the country and visit all the parks, and there were 59 at the time. I think there are a few more now. And I want to say this was 2017 or 2016, something along those lines. And his engagement had just broken up right before the wedding. He was not happy, but he comes up with this idea that he's going to spend the year going around to all the national parks, and he's going to do work for, I don't remember which TV, national broadcasting company, over the course of the year. At some of them, at least, they filmed at some of them and did little things. I don't know. But anyway, so a few years after that, he writes this book about going to all these national parks. So it's interesting. He groups them by theme, essentially. So he's not talking about it in chronological order or anything, but there's a couple that, he talks about all the caves in one chapter, or he talks about ones that have similar stories involving who founded them or what, stuff like that. So he came up with some reasoning for grouping them the way he did. And then he talked about all of them, and I thought it was quite interesting. I enjoyed it. It's got, for my taste, a little bit too much about him. I'm like, bro, I don't care, let's move on. But still, I learned some stuff about the national parks. I mean, I definitely learned about ones that I'd honestly never heard of before. I counted, and I believe I have visited 17 of them. Possibly 18, because I'm not sure if I've been to Saguaro National Park or not. I think I might have, but it also might have just been a different park in Tucson that had saguaros in it. Because I just utterly failed to really notice where we were at the time, and I was in college, so I don't really have an excuse. I visited a lot of national parks as a child, so I really have been to basically none of them on my own. It's always just been with my parents. So however, yeah, I think I counted 17, possibly 18 of the original 59. I have also, I guess I included, I guess I was thinking of, because at the end of the book there's the last chapter where he talks about a couple of, 3 national parks that have been created after that particular year, including Indiana Dunes, which of course I've been to. So I think that was included in the 17. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. It was interesting to learn about national parks that I've never been to, and kind of get an idea, at least a little bit of what they are, where they are, why they exist. Because, you can be it's Black Canyon of the Gunnison, it's Biscayne, and I'm genuinely, the fuck are those? But now I kind of know. I don't remember what's in, I think Biscayne has swamps. I think it's in Florida. Anyway. Yeah, the thing that's always made me sad about national parks is how, besides the dunes, which is just not that interesting, I'm sorry, and apparently the St. Louis Arch, which is also not that interesting, I'm sorry, they're all pretty fucking far away for where I live. I guess Voyageurs, and there's also this weird island one in Lake Superior, Isle Royale, I think it's called. They're all so far away. They're all I'm sorry, you have to drive all the way to Utah. and it's in the middle of a desert. But I love the national parks. I think it's such a good idea, and I want to go visit more of them. Anyway, I wished the book had taught me even more about them and their history, because I'm always like here being like, but give me the stats, give me the facts, but whatever. I mean, it was interesting. Okay, so that was the only book I read this month that I don't possess, but I have a stack. Like, for once, I can hold up a whole stack of books. I can be like, look at this, I read books. Okay, so I'm gonna start, let's start with Fading Ads of Chicago by Joseph Marlin. This is such a weird book. So a cousin of mine gave me this from Christmas a few years ago, and I finally picked it up. It's not exactly the kind of book you read, but like, I did read it. Essentially the idea is that this guy spent decades of his life living in Chicago taking pictures of wall advertisements that he found. So as an example of a particularly nice looking one, so it's basically like back, this is from the 1930s, he says, and was on the Lincoln half block north of Menominee. Okay, so like he tells you when he took the picture, when he estimates the ad was from, and where it was. A lot of them no longer exist. Like, there are a lot of these pictures are like, he took it in the 80s and it doesn't exist anymore because it's been painted over or not, buildings knocked down or whatever. But yeah, so this is the way, one way that things used to be advertised. And I guess there's a group of people who find this kind of thing interesting. There's a number of other books from other cities. He lists them back here. There's a Birmingham, Cincinnati, New York City, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. So yeah, it's just kind of a fun thing. I don't know, like, he divides it by part of Chicago, so like north, south, west loop, and then by the types of things they're advertising. So it's just kind of like, these are, you know, clothing stores, and these are cars, and these are alcohol. Yeah, so not a ton to say about that. But let's move on to the bigger fish of the month. I'm gonna talk about Pathfinders, The Golden Age of Arabic Science by Jim Al-Khalili. This was really interesting. I've been wanting to read this book for years. I don't really know where I first heard that it existed, but it was a lot newer back then. This book's like 10 years old, but, or a little more actually. But yeah, basically during the Middle Ages, the Arab-speaking world was having an absolute renaissance of scientific thought. And he talks about some specific people, he talks about some of the history and the places. It's really interesting because, as usual, as soon as I start learning about, like, stop looking at him, my camera is like a face. Okay, as I start reading a book that's talking about like history of some place that's not America or Europe, I'm like, damn, there's so much going on here that I just don't really know that much about. I mean, sure, I've heard of Ibn Sina, and I've heard of fucking Baghdad, obviously, but you know, there's a lot, and there's a couple of maps, and there's some like, you know, old artwork and diagrams and things. I also enjoy that he felt the need to include pictures of his family in here. And himself as a little kid, but like some cool ancestors of his that did some interesting stuff. Like, imagine being able to, like, yeah, this is my great-great-great uncle, who was personal physician to the 19th century reformist Shah Nasser al-Din Qajar. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, couldn't be me, but that doesn't matter. It's very interesting. We talk about the history of science a lot and I've read a lot of quite a few books about the history of science, and they really don't often talk about what was going on in the Arab-speaking world, which is too bad because stuff was going on. And it makes a good link between ancient Greece and all of their science, and then like Renaissance Europe. And it is the link between those two things. Especially, you know, but it oftentimes doesn't get talked about as much beyond maybe acknowledging that translation of those Greek texts into Arabic, and then from Arabic into Latin, usually, I think, some centuries later in Europe, that was the connection. That was how Europe got those texts, but without acknowledging also that there were like scientists and philosophers in the Arab-speaking world. I keep putting it that way, by the way, because he's got like a whole chapter in here being like, I'm going to explain to you why I'm calling it Arabic science as opposed to anything else. Because he says Arabic science because it was being done in Arabic, not just by Arab people, not just by Muslims, but specifically in Arabic. So that's why that. It's interesting. Yeah, it really is. Like, it was it's interesting stuff. I'm sorry, I just said that 20 times. But yeah, whatever. Like, I'm glad I finally read this because I feel like I learned a lot. Yeah. Now finally, we're going to talk about the real experience this month. The real accomplishment, which was reading the entirety of these two fucking things, okay? A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. This is like 2,000 pages worth of high-ass, thick fucking fantasy, and I love this series so much, and of course I've been rereading it all year. And I decided that since I'm gonna reread it, like, why not look up a guide that would tell me how to read these two books together? Because you can do it, because there's a lot of timeline overlap. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun way to approach these two books. Especially since it means you don't have to read the entirety of A Feast for Crows before you get to see Daenerys again. Yeah, it was great. I got a bunch of little, like, those little post-it, oh god, what are they called? Like for annotating, you know, and like tabs. There we go. I got the little post-it tabs, numbered them chapters 1 to 119, because that's how many you get, and then put them all in the right spots. I actually did fuck up the order of a couple Cersei chapters at one point, and then realized it was like, fuck, all right. But besides that, I did everything correctly, and then off I went, and it took me like a month. Which, considering how long these books are, is impressive, but I feel like it reads quickly, right? It reads quickly, at least for me, because I've read the books before, and, you know, I love them so much. But yeah, I'm so glad I finally read these. I don't know what there is to say about the series itself. Like, it's hard to talk, you know, vaguely or like without getting into a bunch of spoilers, but I will say that I am once more begging George R.R. Martin to finish Winds of Winter. Like, I feel bad because I'm sure he gets that literally all the time, okay? And I'm sure he does, but also I hope he finishes them soon. Them, it, whatever. I hope he finishes soon, because I'm on the edge of my fucking seat, bro. Like, there's just so many things that I want, you know, I want to see what happens next. And characters who are sort of left in almost a cliffhanger, like, anyway. It's torment. But yeah, so I had a wonderful time reading those again. And yeah, so overall, like, it was a very successful month of reading. And I hope to have another very successful month in October. I probably will have a longer list, I think, because I'm reading some like shorter books, and like, baby, this was too much. Like, yeah, I'm not again going to be tackling anything quite this enormously long, or anything that takes as long as that. So the rest of the year, I'm going to be reading stuff that's less than 2,000 pages long, I promise. But yeah, it was a good reading month. I hope you all had a good reading month. And I'll see you next time.